Hi everyone, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology. Today I'm bringing you the chart of the new moon solar eclipse at 0 degrees of Cancer happening on June 21st, 2020 at 12:40 a.m. in the morning Mountain Daylight Time. So this eclipse is happening just on the heels of the summer solstice, which occurs the day before. The summer solstice always happens in the sign of Cancer, and it is when we experience the longest day of the year in the northern hemisphere, the most sunlight. And then the days progressively start to get shorter until we reach the equinox, the fall equinox, when then the days actually become shorter than than the uh, than the nights. But the summer solstice is when we are experiencing the longest day. So there's this symbolism for the light reaching its peak, the expression of the divine self, the expression of our purpose, our identity in the sign of Cancer, which deals with being emotional and being sensitive and being nurturing and being mothering and being caring and wanting to feel secure. But at the same time that we're experiencing that solstice energy, the the sun is going to actually be eclipsed by the moon. So there's an additional symbolism to this solstice time at this new moon solar eclipse time. And when we look at the actual astronomy of an eclipse, what's happening at a new moon solar eclipse is that the moon is moving over the sun. And so symbolically, it's the emotions that are eclipsing the shining of our light. And which means basically that the feelings take on a very significant uh, purpose or a significant sense. And that shining of our light kind of recedes to the background momentarily. And what this can symbolize, because this is what is also called a new moon at the solar eclipse time, is that we are experiencing new beginnings. It's a very powerful new moon time to have the solar eclipse at a new moon. And we are temporarily hiding that solar light and allowing the emotions to come forth. And sometimes those emotions can be very strong and very pronounced. And it's in a way like cleaning or clearing any sort of past identification. That would be a term for the sun, with whatever archetype the sun and the moon are shining themselves through. So in this case, it is the sign of Cancer, which again deals with feelings and mothering and nurturing. It also relates a lot to our past, because Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon becomes a container for all past experience, which then becomes our memories, which we draw from. So at this new moon in Cancer time, this solar eclipse new moon Cancer time, we are temporarily covering the light, the way that we've shined our light out through the Cancerian nature, and the feelings are becoming very prominent at this time. Prominent in the sense that we could even be seeing where they might be being distorted. And this is a time then where we can be really kind of clearing out any connection to the past, and the way that we express the solar nature and the lunar nature, the way we identify with and the way we express our emotions through this principle of Cancer, this principle of nurturing, and this principle of being mothering and being sensitive. In fact, we can really experience a lot of sensitivity at this time as we're approaching this new moon and going through this new moon experience, where we are able to see maybe where some of our sensitivity is extremely heightened and very much connected to our past. And perhaps there's an opportunity to establish new, which is a new moon energy, new ways of shining our light in conjunction with our emotional expression through this Cancerian archetype, bringing more sensitivity, bringing more ability to nurture, bringing more ability to mother, to our lives and to those in our lives as we move forward. But eclipses often bring about change, especially if you have any planets close to the degrees of zero, in any cardinal sign, because Cancer is a cardinal sign. So if you have anything at 0 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, then this new moon solar eclipse will affect you more strongly. But you can also put the new moon into any chart, and you can see what area of life this new moon is going to be highlighting. This clearing away of the old and making way for the new in regards to our sensitivities, our ability to nurture, our ability to express ourselves emotionally, to share our feelings, to create security and safety around us. Now, eclipse energies can last up to 6 months until the next series of eclipses. So this is the seeding of the energy time where we will then see this begin to manifest over the next 6 months. And I wanted to share something from another astrologer who writes about this eclipse time in regards to the symbolism of it. And this is from Love by Luna, and talking about the new moon solar eclipse in the sign of Cancer. She says that Cancer season has everything to do with prioritizing your emotional security, and its cardinal waters are here to wash away your fears and burdens in order for you to create a divine sanctuary within yourself. Having said that, this new moon solar eclipse will also serve as a reminder to practice empathy. It will also shed light on the areas where you need to cultivate compassion for yourself and for the people around you. I want to look at the chart, and I also want to look at the inside degrees and then read a card that I chose for this reading in particular. And let's go ahead and start with the inside degrees of 0 Cancer. It's actually 1 degree Cancer from the Inside Degrees book by Elias Lonsdale. And he writes, "A potter at work, carving out a sacred place for what you most care about to flourish, giving your all to a task or project, a way of life or shared stream. Socio-culturally gifted, selecting out what you feel pulled to cultivate and foster, and eliminating all other factors. You feel nurturing, sustaining, giving, but unwilling and unable to recognize and come to terms with shadows and difficulties. So intent upon creating a perfect world or vessel that you miss whatever you do not want to see. And this is a precarious edge to walk." That's interesting. So to me, what I'm feeling from this is it's talking about almost doing something with blinders on, or you want something so much, carving out a sacred space for what you care about, to what you most care about to flourish, giving your all to a task or project, and seeking out what you feel pulled to cultivate and foster. So it's like you really want to decide where to share your energy. You feel nurturing, sustaining, giving, but unwilling and unable to recognize and come to terms with shadows and difficulties. So it's the necessity to also be able to really in some ways be able to see objectively and be able to discern. So intent upon creating a perfect world or vessel that you miss whatever you do not want to see. And I think that speaks to some of the way that this energy is manifesting collectively. And I'll speak to that a little bit as we get into the chart here, because one big piece of this new moon time, this new moon solar eclipse, I feel is as we are opening up to new ways of expressing our kindness and our sensitivity and our nurturing, we do have to be aware of really being so attached to the past that it can create these blinders, and we're unable to allow ourselves to let go maybe of certain ways that we identify with the past in order to allow the newness, the new moonness to come into being. And part of that, I feel, has to do with the fact that this new moon does create a square with Mars in Pisces. Mars is how we assert ourselves. Mars is our drive. Mars is taking action. It is the warrior energy. And in the sign of Pisces, this can be the spiritual warrior. This can be the martyr. This can be somebody who does want to assert the self with empathy and compassion and universal love and understanding. But if we go back to that reading where it's talking about how we are so intent upon creating a perfect world or vessel that we miss what we don't want to see. That to me speaks to this square between the sun and moon in Cancer squared Mars in Pisces, where sometimes we can be almost overly sacrificial with Pisces. We can become the martyr in our actions, and we're not necessarily seeing the whole picture, especially if our emotions are so invested with the sun and the moon conjunct in Cancer that we've got those blinders on. And I'm going to bring up a sensitive example that I saw recently on social media, where it was a video of a man, and he was African-American man talking with an African-American woman, and it's hard to see what she's saying to him, but at one point he picks up his skateboard, which he has in his hands, and she's looking down at her phone, and he just hits her in the head with the skateboard, and she goes down to the ground. And the context of this video being posted was on somebody who is on social media who has been talking about how she feels as an African-American woman that it's very important to address some of the cultural stigmas within the African-American community when we are especially right now focusing a lens on racism and on the way that certain people are mistreated by the police in the African-American community. And her stance, it's actually quite strong and extreme, where she is basically feeling as if she doesn't want to identify with this way of kind of looking at African-American people as being victims necessarily. And she does take a stand to point out that, like in that video that I just described, there is a certain complacency in her culture where they don't call out men's behavior in the way that that she sees it in culturally, for example, in that video, and she's kind of coming at it from a very different place. And in some ways I commend her for sort of standing up to a very different view, I guess, of what people are really talking about right now, because she's saying, you know, I'm not going to defend people who behave badly. I'm not going to defend criminals. I'm not going to defend, you know, and look, you know, look at what we need to address in our community as far as how certain men act and are not, you know, necessarily ridiculed for it, or, you know, we're not trying to change that aspect of our community. It's such a sensitive thing to talk about. As you can tell, I'm having difficulty. But the reason I'm sharing that example is because I feel that that's part of what this new moon in Cancer, this new moon solar eclipse in Cancer is about. It's like we're really identifying with the past and the way things have been. And yes, it's very important to look at all of that and to change the way that you know, people have been held back or discriminated against and put down. But she's also talking about how we can so much identify with a certain perspective that we're not, you know, we're not standing up for necessarily. We're almost like being overly sacrificial, or we're martyring ourselves to the extent that we don't really fully stay open to those other parts that need to be addressed, those shadows that need to be seen, in order for us to truly move forward and truly lift everybody up within the collective. So that's a little bit about the Sun conjunct Moon in Cancer squaring Mars in Pisces at this new moon solar eclipse time. It can kind of be washing away some of that Cancerian identification with the past and allowing us to establish new ways of moving forward in a nurturing, compassionate, mothering way that doesn't necessarily create this fighting for any cause, at going to any extreme, to have so much empathy and compassion that there's no boundaries, there's no rules, you know, it's just always like, you know, well, you know, root for the underdog at all costs. So a little bit of an example of that energy in this chart. And I guess if we were to pull it back to a personal level, we could see at this time, perhaps, you know, where we have been doing that with ourselves. You know, have we been making excuses for why, you know, we behave in certain ways, why we act in certain ways that maybe don't have the you know, maybe that in ways that we've been sort of excusing our own lack of boundaries, or our own lack of integrity. You know, again, Mars in Pisces wants to assert in this compassionate and empathetic and being so connected to spirit that it's like we've lost, you know, sort of a groundedness in reality. And so that would be how we might be able to reflect upon our own lives as to where this energy might be playing itself out in regards to, yes, we want to be in touch with our past and with our history and with our sensitive, emotional, nurturing, mothering expression. But at the same time, we need to very much take into account like how we are taking action that is, you know, truly in this way that brings in a spiritual perspective and a compassionate perspective, but at the same time isn't totally denying the shadow. All right, so that's one aspect of this new moon solar eclipse energy. And, you know, another way that this could be playing itself out is where we could, you know, where we may be feeling like we're the victims in life. And are we really seeing clearly, or do we need to maybe begin to cultivate a place within ourselves, within our homes, an environment where we can begin to nurture ourselves, where we can begin to nurture our energy and really choose a focus that we want to create space for and create an environment for, that we can develop within our own lives. You know, have we been creating excuses for ourselves as to why we haven't necessarily been accomplishing or working towards with that Mars energy, because we've you know, we've identified so much with the way things have been, and we've in some ways become kind of a victim to it. That would very much be Pisces energy, where we just feel like it's not our fault and everything, you know, everything's against us, and where we may need to be stepping more into creating an environment and nurturing our own lives more, so that we can you know, move forward with empowerment and with a true connection to our feelings and our roots, and a deep connection inside of ourselves that allows us to then create from there. And then we won't have to, you know, act in those ways where we feel like we're suffering, or we're you know, being treated in a certain way. It's like we can have empathy and compassion, but we can also move on. I mean, that's really a Piscean quality, because it's mutable and it's water, so it can act in a ways that just swims away. You know, that's very much Mars and Pisces. All right, another energy that's happening at this time of the new moon solar eclipse is that we're going to be having an inconjunct to Saturn in Aquarius. And Saturn right now is retrograde. It's going to move back into Capricorn, and then we'll go direct and finally come back into Aquarius for good for the next couple of years. But right now, we're going retrograde with Saturn in Aquarius at 0 degrees, but it's a tight inconjunct, 150-degree angle to this new moon solar eclipse. And what that can be indicating with the inconjunct to Saturn in Aquarius is that there's something here about the work that we need to do, the effort that we need to put into things, the responsibilities that we need to take on, the maturity that we need to have, is being expressed at this new moon solar eclipse time in Aquarius, which has to do with humanity. Aquarius has to do with being an individual. It has to do with being, in some ways, rebellious, but really it's about humanity and let me get a few more keywords to get a clearer understanding here. Progressiveness, inspiration, independence, unconventionality, liberation, inclusiveness, humanitarianism. So it's what is our responsibility to humanity is what the question is here. What is our responsibility in the way that we do our work, the way that we put effort into what we do, the way that we take responsibility? Is it in this humanitarian way? Is it in this way that brings liberation and inclusiveness and inspiration and progressiveness? Because we're coming out of this Capricornian themed time. I mean, we do have Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, we have Jupiter retrograde in Capricorn, and now Saturn's going to go back retrograding into Capricorn. So there's this huge transformation happening around the sign of Capricorn, which deals with the patriarchy, which deals with the government and the structures that hold our society together. And they're going through a huge ethical revolution, is what I would call it, because Jupiter is ethics, Pluto is death and transformation and rebirth, and Saturn is the physical structure that, you know, keeps everything together. So Saturn has moved into Aquarius, and we've gotten a little taste of what this inclusiveness is going to have to you know, look like. But Saturn is still going back as it's retrograding, and eventually will go back for the last time into Capricorn. But we're still at this new moon solar eclipse time having that Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. So we're still getting that taste of what is it like for us to have to consider humanity and to be inclusive in regards to the structures that we create that govern society, but also in our personal life, in the way that we assert ourselves through our work and through creating structure and foundation in our own lives. Does it have this quality of inclusiveness, of thinking of humanity, of thinking of how we affect others, really? So the inconjunct is saying that it's hard to see the energies together with an inconjunct, and we have to adjust. So what this is saying is that there might be a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling that is coming up at this new moon solar eclipse time. And because some of the eclipse energy deals with letting go and creating space for the new, again, this might be relating to how we do have to relate to release the past. We do have to let go on an emotional level of the past that allows for this inclusiveness and this ability to bring in humanity into the way that we create structure and the way we take on responsibility and the way that we create foundation in our lives. And so that's a very strong pattern for this new moon solar eclipse time. It has a lot to do with our personal goals and our personal authority. That's another term for Saturn. So it's almost like we're having to mature. We're having to grow up a bit, and we're having to look at the way that we impact the world, really, and how some of maybe our emotional patterns have influenced some of the way that we've emotionally related to our lives in the past, and how can we move through this new moon solar eclipse time where we're releasing some of those old ways of relating on an emotional level and allowing for new ways that do still offer our ability to nurture and to mother and to offer, you know, an emotional response, essentially, but at the same time, it's not so overly emotional that we're not allowing ourselves to really consider others in this process and to take on personal responsibility for how we do affect others. Another interesting pattern at this new moon solar eclipse time is that we are getting Mars in Pisces sextiling Jupiter in Capricorn. And that's happening, that occurred just before, the day before this solar eclipse time. And basically what this is saying is that this desire for Mars in Pisces to express itself in a very sensitive and compassionate and empathetic way and spiritual way is making a harmonious angle with Jupiter, which deals with philosophical perspectives and expanding our world philosophically, and really growth and optimism. These are all Jupiterian qualities in this sign of Capricorn, which is Jupiter in its fall sign, because it doesn't fully operate at its strength in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn, again, being ruled by Saturn, dealing with things, for example, like accountability, self-discipline, hard work, organization, caution, ambition. So Jupiter expanding our perspective through this Capricornian energy is being supported right now by Mars and Pisces. And Mars and Pisces is bringing this compassionate energy, this spiritual energy to the way that we are kind of reflecting as Jupiter's moving retrograde through the sign of Capricorn on the ways that we expand in this Capricornian way. So basically it might be, you know, showing us and spiritualizing some of the ways that we might see that, okay, maybe we've overstepped some boundaries. That's Jupiter. You know, we've focused so much on expansion that it's almost like at what cost? I mean, that's what we're seeing reflected in society right now. It's this goat climbing the mountain, you know, of ambition to the expense of everything else and everyone else. So we're seeing, and because Pluto's nearby, it's transforming. It's really creating death and transformation around that, the Capricornian principle, and really asking us to kind of learn more about personal authority in this process. So this Mars and Pisces is allowing us to become a little more sensitive and understanding in the ways that we want to expand and want to grow through these Capricornian themes, again, of work, organization, ambition, goal-oriented, but seeing, you know, the importance of having a more spiritual approach to it, a more less ego and more sensitivity and more understanding as we take action while we're expanding and growing. So a nice combination between these two energies at this new moon solar eclipse time. And I'll leave on this last point that is happening at the new moon solar eclipse time. It's important to note, well, also 2 points. Venus is stationing retrograde, which means it's at the degree that it's going to begin to go direct, which is going to happen on the 25th of June in just about 4 days. And also, it's interesting to note too that Neptune is going to be going retrograde in the next couple of days. It's going to be so it's stationed too, moving retrograde in the next couple of days. And Neptune rules the sign of Pisces. So this is going to amplify this theme of bringing a more spiritual perspective, you know, really kind of taking more spiritual responsibility for how we impact others. But Neptune is going to be in retrograde for a length of time. So this is going to become a more significant theme as we move into the rest of the year. But going back to Venus stationing, getting ready to go direct, Venus having been retrograding in Gemini, now she's going to turn direct. Now she's going to come online, and this energy of expressing our loving nature, expressing balance and harmony, expressing beauty, expressing creativity through our words, Gemini, through our logical mind, through our connections to each other in our local environments. So this is a nice omen that we're going to have Venus getting ready to turn direct and share her gifts that she's been learning through her retrograde time with everyone. And this connects to the last point that I'm going to make, which is the moon, the sun and the moon have just conjunct the North Node in Gemini. And the North Node in Gemini is symbolizing where we are going collectively for the next year and a half on a destiny level, on a fate level. And Gemini, again, has to do with the logical mind. So what this is going to be bringing up is really how it's important that we use logic and we use rational thinking in order to understand situations. That's Gemini. Gemini gathers facts, and then it says, okay, I've got all these facts. Now, what do we understand? What's the truth here? And that it's very important that we stay connected to the rational energy through this time, because there's so much that can draw us into our emotions, especially as we're experiencing this new moon solar eclipse in Cancer. It's an interesting connection here. It's almost saying like that new moon in, that north node in Gemini having just met up with these two energies, the sun and the moon. It's saying, don't forget, use your logic, use your rationale. Let's not get lost in our emotions. And in fact, let's sort of let go of some of the past in regards to our emotional connection, and create a clean slate for nurturing and loving and mothering and sensitivity moving forward. And I think Venus and Gemini moving direct too is going to be helping bring that rational piece into the way that we choose to express our loving nature, and the way that we choose to express our creative self, and create harmony and balance on our environments, is again through that logical and rational nature. All right, I'd like to end with reading the card that I chose for this reading, and this one is called Trust. And this is from the Power Deck by Lynn Andrews. And here's what Trust says. In love, there must be trust. Without trust, there is no love. Jealousy is an illness of the mind and heart. Trust lives in the lodge of your innocence. The Heyoka is a warrior of the Native American tradition who goes into battle backward on his horse with a broken lance, knowing that the Great Spirit will protect him. It is this kind of trust that you need. The imbalanced aspects of patriarchal history reside like stone carvings within each of us. Welcome the new aspects of feminine power in your being, even though they may seem foreign. Trust the ways of power and the Great Spirit. Know that you are made of power and live with trust in your heart. I think that's a wonderful summary for this new moon solar eclipse chart, because it's asking us to, let go a lot of the damage that patriarchy has created within all of us. What was the words? Patriarchy. The imbalanced aspects of patriarchal history reside like stone carvings within each of us. This aggressive kind of going after at all costs, at the expense of emotion and feeling and trusting. Trusting what? Trusting our intuition, trusting our feelings, trusting our inner knowing, our inner guiding. And that's what this is talking about. So it's saying that like the way forward is not more dominance and more control and trying to create by force. This is talking about how we have to learn to get more in touch with the feminine energy, which is what Cancer is all about. And it's asking us to trust the feminine as the guide, and not the hurt feminine that has been dominated by the patriarchy. This is a new moon solar eclipse washing away a lot of that pain and stepping into a clean slate of how do we move forward from a emotional, feminine, sensitive place that is not wounded, that is not hurt, that is coming from a place of trust and a place of connectedness to our intuition and our emotions and our feelings, and allowing that to guide us moving forward. Know that you are made of power and live with trust in your heart. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this is a wonderful new moon solar eclipse for you. And I really appreciate you viewing my videos. If you like them, please subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video. Take care.